Hey, welcome back to Transform Your Workplace. I'm your host, Brandon Laws, and this is the podcast that brings you real conversations and fresh perspective to help you build a healthier, more connected, and future-ready workplace. Every week, we explore what it means to lead well, communicate clearly, and create environments where people can thrive. This episode is sponsored by Xenium HR, your trusted partner in building smart, competitive workplaces. If your organization is growing and you're struggling to stay competitive in today's labor market, Xenium's compensation consulting services can help. From market-aligned pay structures to incentive plan design, we tailor compensation strategies to attract and retain talent without compromising your values. Learn more at xeniumhr.com. Now, today's guest is someone who brings both deep HR wisdom and a fresh take on the generational shifts happening at work. Marcia Homer is a longtime HR pro, Gen X through and through, and co-author of the book Play the Game: Insider Strategies to Thrive in Your Early Career Without Compromising Ambition, Values, and Well-Being. She's also a passionate advocate for Gen Z in the workplace, helping leaders understand them, support them, and unlock their full potential. In our conversation, we talk candidly about why Gen Z is showing up to work differently, not lazily, the huge role technology, supervision, and global events have played in shaping this generation, common workplace friction points between Gen Z and Gen X or millennial managers, what leaders can do to bridge generational gaps with clarity, empathy, and better communication, and why non-judgmental curiosity might be the most important leadership skill of the next decade. If you've ever felt frustrated, confused, or even just a little curious about how to support the newest generation in your workplace, this episode's for you. Let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Marcia Homer. Marcia, it is such a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Brandon. It's so nice to be here.
So you've got like an interesting career. You've got a career in HR.
Been in HR forever, yes.
HR forever. Then you went out and wrote a book. You co-authored it called Play the Game: Insider Strategies to Thrive in Your Early Career Without Compromising Ambition, Values, and Well-Being. And you're this Gen Z expert. And I know a lot of people are talking about Gen Z. There's quite frankly a lot of talk. I work with many Gen Z people. I work with a lot of millennials and Xers. There's clearly a gap between how each of these generations have grown up, and they have like a lot of different strengths, and some people might see weaknesses, but every generation has them, right? So give me some perspective, give listeners some perspective when it comes to the Xer and millennial generation. How did Gen Z grow up a little differently?
It all goes to how we were raised and the filters and the experiences we bring into the workplace. But I'm a hardcore Gen Xer, proud to be. And we were the original latchkey kids. We were called that, if you remember. A lot of women went back to work in the 70s and 80s. So there were a lot of empty houses after school, and some kids would put the house key around their neck so they wouldn't lose the key, so they could get into the house after school because mom wasn't there. And let me tell you, my mom never worked, much to my dismay, but I had two friends whose mom, that both worked, and those were the houses you wanted to be in after school. Like, nobody kept an eye on us. Nobody cared what we were doing. We would pull things out of that house and build tree huts and forts, and then we would jump on our bikes and be 10, 15 miles away from home, and nobody ever cared where we were. The only thing that we knew were when the street lights came on, we all went home. So you can see we weren't monitored at all. So we had to fend for ourselves. We had to figure things out. It forced a strong sense of resilience. And we chose our own packs. We chose our own leaders. We fought our bullies. Well, we fought or we ran away. So we figured out fight or flight really early on. And it was a lot of emphasis on, like I said, resilience. So I heard suck it up a lot. I heard, oh, walk it off. As a Gen X manager, we roll into the workplace and we're not too comfortable with emotion either, because we heard, walk it off, suck it up, you'll be fine. So we learned how to just shove our emotions and our thoughts down deep inside. And it's this tough love approach. We value FaceTime. We were out in the real world having real engagement, so we value that FaceTime. And I grew up in a era of you didn't bring your personal life to work. You just didn't do it. It wasn't deemed professional to talk about like social issues at work and anything like that. So as a Gen X manager, I'm a little uncomfortable with emotion. When employees start to talk about their personal lives too much, I get a little uncomfortable. Yeah, that's how Gen X, that's how we were raised. So that's how we show up in the workplace. I guess the elder millennials have a lot of the same values, were raised the same way. But a Gen Zer, if you think about that generation, they're the most connected and the most supervised generation ever. If you think about everything they've done, they've had scheduled play dates, they've had after school lessons, summer camps, it's all been organized. They've been connected since they were born. So they have sort of a digital view of everything. They're very aware of what's going on globally. So a lot of world events shape the way they think. If you think of recently, 9/11, 2008 crisis, climate change is big on Gen Z's mind. And, and then if you look at COVID, Brandon, if you look at how long COVID was, a lot of this generation graduated from high school or graduated from college while they were sitting on their couch. So that interaction has gone away as well. So you can see when a Gen Zer can show up in the workplace and has a Gen X manager, you can see how that conflict would arise. A Gen Zer needs a little extra, maybe a little extra patience, a little extra time. They want to be showed how to do things, versus a Gen X manager's like, well, I had to figure it out, so they should figure it out themselves. So we've got a lot of that conflict. And Gen Z likes to talk about their purpose. They don't want to wear burnout as a badge of honor. They just don't want to do it. Where my generation, that was a badge of honor, how hard we worked. So those are a lot of conflicts that we see in the workplace come out of those differences. And I'll say one more thing about that, but Gen Xers we tend to be like, oh, they can figure it out. So we're not the most welcoming and, rolling out the red carpet. So there's work to be done on both sides, but I fear that the leaders or the Gen X in charge, we feel like Gen X has to do all the work and Gen X has to make all the change, when I think there are things to be said and done on both sides.
I'm glad we started with just the gaps between the generations, just because there's so much nature and nurture at play with this. I mean, if you think about both parents worked, and so then the kids are left alone at home, that's a product of the way you were brought up, your parents' situation, and then societal level, the world is what it is. Gen Z grew up with devices in their hands, and that is a product of society. That just happened to them. I'm seeing it with my kids. My kids are a teenager and an 11-year-old. And from a very young age, they had access to iPads and cell phones. And please don't judge me as a parent. It's just available, right? And
I have cats, and they're not allowed to have phones, so you're good. You're good.
But I mean, I set boundaries for sure. But this is sort of bigger than my parenting in a lot of ways. Social media has changed the way a lot of us are connected, and you talk about those moments that have happened in time. I grew up through 9/11 and the Great Recession, but we didn't have social media at the time to sit there, stay glued to headlines and talking to our peers and friends about what this all means. And a lot of it always turns to doom and gloom. And so I just, I fear for these younger generations growing up with just constantly being connected and what it's doing to their brain, for one.
I absolutely agree. And if Jonathan Haidt wrote a book last year called The Anxious Generation. I don't know.
I'm actually reading right now. A lot of that, my ideas are coming from that book.
Yes, it was fascinating. Yeah. And he called what you're just describing the great rewiring of these digital natives that have just been sitting and staring at their phones for years, and how that has led to mental health issues with anxiety and depression. And the thing I hear a lot in Gen Zers is imposter syndrome too. they show up and feel like they have to know everything or be everything. So being a digital native, I think it's really impacted. And Jonathan Haidt explains it very well with their brains have just been rewired. Where you and I grew up, we were used to, free play, and we took risks, and we were in person, and we had a lot of social interaction. And this generation has just been missed out on all of that.
And obviously, like through COVID too, all of us, even the Xers and millennials, we were all forced into lockdown, and what that did to a lot of us, especially those who were already socially isolated, and then just this compounded it. So it's just, I think employers and leaders are now trying to pick up the pieces of like, where do we go from here? And how do we get these people connected? How do we get everybody connected? Because we're now working all together, multiple generations in the workplace. And as a leader, it becomes quite challenging to bridge the gap.
So challenging. And here's the thing, and hi, HR people, I'm going to rat us all out, but when COVID happened, none of us knew what to do. It was all like overnight. Every HR person in the world who had for years told their employees, nope, you can't work from home. Nope, that job can't be done from home. I told a million people that. Oh, overnight, guess what? We all had to go home and figure out how to do it. And HR, and yes, all of leadership, but a lot of this fell on HR to figure out what the process was. And when someone got COVID, we had to figure out how to report all of that. So you're right. It just upended everything. And I'm not sure we're doing or talking enough about how to get back what we had before. And that is the meaningful interactions and the thoughtfulness in communication is, I believe, what is lacking here. And nobody really knows what to do. So we're trying a lot of different things. But to me, it's the communication about how we help each other feel safer in this world.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the world's forever changed. I don't think we're going back, but I think there's ways to instill the connection in different ways that is adapting to the new world and where a lot of people want to be. So I wanted to touch on this because I read a lot of headlines. I'm sure you do too. And you hear leaders talk about Gen Z is lazy. Bust this myth for me. This generation is very talented in a lot of different ways, and they could be great for the workplace. But just give me, whether it's data or a story to bust this myth. What do you think?
I hear that a lot too. I hear they're lazy, and I hear they don't want to work anymore. I can't find anyone who wants to work. That's what I hear. And what I always come back with is it's not that they don't want to work, it's that they want to work differently. And they want purpose, and they want flexibility. They want growth over grind. They want to be seen, not just supervised. And they're asking questions about all of that we didn't ask, and we didn't feel like we could ask, or we didn't feel like we had the right to ask. So it's not that they're lazy, it's that they want to work differently. They want their work to have some meaning, and they want to know that they're adding value. So when they don't feel those things, then I don't know if it's a checking out or if they're not as engaged. But it's not that they're lazy, it's just that they want to work differently. They don't, like I said, they don't want to just burn out. There has to be purpose in their work. So if you can take the time to have a thoughtful conversation about how their work aligns to goals, what your expectations are from them, then it's an engagement and a morale shift that happens then if you can show them that their work has meaning.
I think this is a good shift. I don't know what you think, but if they're able to talk and communicate with their leaders about what they want out of work, and they want balance, and they don't want to grind and burn out, I think those are all really good things and healthy things for society. That also tells me that leadership is changing, because there has been forever this fear-based leadership, and where probably not psychologically safe, where when I was a millennial, I mean, I've always worked for a great company and great leadership, and I always had an ability to walk into the president's office and like, here's what I think, or here's what I want. Not everybody has that, but I think there is a shift happening. And I do think because organizations are having that psychologically safe shift in their leadership and their organizations, Gen Z is like, this is my time. Like I can maybe get what I want, and maybe I'll stay for the long term. What do you think about that?
We say it in the book a couple of times, but I My point when I talk to any Gen Zer, I will say, look, I know you want to change the world, and God bless you for that. I have been wanting to talk about mental health in the workplace. I've been wanting to talk about flexibility. I've been wanting to talk about, hey, maybe your work should have some meaning. I, as an HR pro, have been wanting to talk about that forever. So thank you, Gen Z, for bringing up the conversation. I know you want to change the world, but hang on, slow your roll just a second. I know you want to change the world, and I will help you do that. But in order to do that, just slow down, take a little bit of patience, and learn the rules of the game, learn the environment, learn how and who makes the decisions in your organization. Take a minute, look where the informal leadership is. And the best way to do this as a Gen Zer is to ask or find a mentor in your company that will help you do this. But if I like to tell them, I know you're going to change the world, I'll help you do it, but just slow down for a minute, take in your environment, think about the way you're communicating what you need and what you want, because sometimes the way you communicate it is a little bit aggressive. I want it right now, give me this right now. If you'll just take a beat, slow down, and learn the environment, then I promise you we can change the world together. So they have the right intent. They have the right, in my opinion, they want the right outcomes, but it's the way you get there and the way you communicate it that I think we all need to take a beat and work on. And I tell this to managers, if a Gen Zer says something and, it's instead of rolling your eyes, instead of thinking, why in the world did they say that? If you can just take a beat and think of it as, oh, this is a colleague that has a different idea. They're not a Gen Z employee that I need to fix. They're just a colleague with a different idea. So I believe they can change the world. We just got to work on how we communicate it with each other.
I mean, it really does come down to communication. And, for a lot of generations, they've always struggled with like feedback and, in the moment stuff. We forever relied on performance reviews. And I think now people are more likely to give feedback in the moment. That's kind of I'm sure as you've grown in your HR career, that's kind of probably the way you've gone too. How does this generation handle feedback? How do they prefer to once a year performance review or in the moment corrective?
From my experience in those I've talked to, they want it in the moment. And first of all, they just want it, period. They want feedback. To them, feedback is a two-way street and traffic goes both ways. So if it's just sitting and hearing your supervisor tell you what to do, I think definitely it's a two-way street. They want feedback, and feedback is a largely personal thing as well. So what I would coach is ask your supervisor or your manager how they give feedback, and then tell them how you prefer to have the feedback given to you. But my experience is they absolutely want it. They want it in the moment. And I've talked with managers who have employees who they want updates all the time. A Gen Z employee maybe is checking in with them 2 or 3 times a day. Am I doing okay? Am I doing okay? What about this? What about this? So it's important to talk to your manager about when you receive feedback and how you receive that feedback, because there could be that conflict of the employee's asking me 5 times a day and I don't have time. So yes, they want it, but let's get clear and communicate when and how often that will be given.
Yeah, it sounds like me. I'm an elder millennial and I do that anyways.
In my experience, it's not that they have soft ears. They can hear, they can hear feedback. I mean, these poor kids have seen headlines for the last 5 years about how terrible they are. So it's not that they can't hear feedback. They really want the feedback. It's just talking about how to give it to be effective.
When it comes to this generation communicating with colleagues and even their manager, do they tend to be oversharing of their personal life, or do they stay pretty reserved and private? Because every generation is very different about this.
In my experience, it's a generation where they like to overshare. That's just a generalization. Of course, there are instances where that might not be true, but in my experience and feedback from managers, again, this is a generation that likes to overshare. And maybe that goes to the way they were raised, and maybe not very many boundaries were put on their conversation. I don't know what went wrong there, but
is it wrong?
They do like to share a lot of personal.
Do you think that is a problem?
It depends. As a Gen X manager, I get a little, oh, don't tell me that. I don't need to know that. And again, it's all about boundaries. It's all about, guess what? This is a professional setting. We're here to do a job. The company expects us to do a certain job. So there is a boundary on what you can bring to work and what you can't. So for those employees, I would tell them in a conversation, maybe it's okay to overshare, but make sure it's maybe in the break room, or maybe a chat with a colleague that's informal, or a Slack channel is a great way to overshare. But in conversations one-on-one, you should set some boundaries and keep things maybe a little closer to the vest is what my coaching would say.
How does this group interact with like time management and productivity? Like, what have you seen from this group? Do they use the tools like time tracking and all these other tools, Asana and Monday and all these other things that help organize their work and their projects and time? Or is it kind of like a free-for-all for them?
From what I've seen, they do use those digital tools. And I would tell my Gen X and millennial colleagues, hey, lean into that knowledge. I have learned so much about digital apps and the digital world from my, Gen Z friends. So my experience is, they've been hustling and grinding and whatever you want to call it for so many years that it just comes natural to them. And for them to have 4 or 5 apps open and working and in all of them just seems to come natural, and adapting to all of that seems to come natural this generation. So I love to lean in and learn. I had no idea how to use ChatGPT until a Gen Zer sat down and showed me exactly how to use it. I can't get away from that thing now. So
no, it's amazing.
There are definitely a lot that you can learn from this generation. And I tell my colleagues, lean into their energy. Lean into that bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. You can sort of get a contact high off of that because, lean into the naivete. And when you can look at an organization with those fresh eyes, you can learn a lot too. So I think they're going to do so much for our workplace if we can just learn how to communicate.
When it comes to career development, I'm curious how leaders can communicate to this generation about their growth opportunity and their possible next promotion, and just be able to have that normal conversation open. I don't know what Gen Z wants out of their leader from this perspective, but what, in your experience, what are they saying?
In my experience, they're all very concerned about a career path. And some of them are a little anxious to be promoted, maybe before the regular process would allow. I've had personally in my last few jobs, I've had several conversations with Gen Zers who were anxious to be promoted and anxious to know what was next in their career path. What I tell them is, the Gen Zers, is that not every promotion is just the next level up on the org chart and more money. There's a lot of different ways to build a career path. You can seek a stretch assignment and that maybe has some leadership potential. You can ask your manager, what skills do I need to grow into the next role? So there are other options, rather than just that promotion. It's being asked to sit on a project team, being asked to communicate with somebody from another organization, just some cross-functional communication. There's a lot of things that you can do that isn't the standard promotion career path. And for managers, I tell them what you can help your Gen Zers with is just to be clear about the promotion timelines. Again, it's about those expectations. Be clear with them what is necessary to get promoted, what skills they need. So be clear, but then also help them know that growth isn't just about a title. There's alternative paths, like I said, skill building, that you can help them with courses. You can coach them in some new skill they want to learn. There's always cross-functional projects going on in an organization that you can assign one of these Gen Zers to. Lateral moves. I've taken a couple lateral moves in my career where you move just to a different part of the organization and learn more skills, and they make you more valuable in your role. So yes, high impact work can get you promoted, but there's also a lot of other things you can do to build your career path that isn't just, another title and more money.
There's such a common theme in this discussion about Gen Z, and it comes down to communication and clarity.
Brandon, my business partner, Ellen, and I, when we first sat down and really started talking about this last year, and collectively together, the two of us have 7 million years in HR experience. And honestly, we started with, okay, what HR programs what HR programs could really help this problem? What could an HR pro do right now out in the world to help this? And, you can look at your benefits, and you can look at if you have, mental health services, you can look at your EAP, you can look at, does Gen Z have some kind of feedback mechanism in the organization? Like, there are a couple of things you can go look at, but really what we came down to, and after sort of a year of talking about this, it's all about how we communicate with each other and how we build that psychological safety. You can have the best mental health benefits in the whole world. You can have the best EAP program. You can have the best feedback mechanism for a Gen Z, or you can have all the suggestion boxes in the world. But if Gen Xers and Millennials are not speaking to them in a way that they will hear it, and then it doesn't matter what HR program you put into place. So fortunately or unfortunately, it all comes back to the way we communicate with each other. And what we have shared with our clients and what we have shared with other companies we've talked to is it's really simple. It just comes down to non-judgmental curiosity. If you can look at a situation with non-judgmental curiosity and start to ask some questions, maybe what's going on in your world that led you to believe that, or what's going on right now that led you to ask me that, or if you can go into these situations with just a little bit of curiosity wrapped in patience, and it's just that easy or that hard. Communicating with curiosity, thinking of that person as just a colleague with a different opinion. They're not a problem you need to fix. And then just having some patience and understanding that we are in a space and time in this world where no one really knows truly what to go do to fix this crazy world. So recognize that and understand that if we all just have some patience and set some expectations and talk kindly to each other, show some empathy, then I think we can absolutely make some progress with the conflict we're seeing with this problem.
I think it's well said. Like, going in with curiosity, non-judgment, not being defensive either. I think those are really good for one-on-ones, even group meetings where you might have multiple generations and Gen Z involved. I'm curious though, from your perspective, when you got a senior leader who's got to communicate across the wider organization and you're hitting up possibly 4 different generations, how do you make sure a message lands across all generations equally? Do you have to shift the message and the platform? This is more the tactical, the how and the what, rather than how I'm approaching a communication. But in your perspective, how do you do this?
Well, my perspective is, all generations want clarity and expectations, want clarity in a message. So overarching message that a senior leader is sending, I don't personally believe you need to tailor each one to each generation. Who has the time to do that? Be clear in your expectations, be clear in your message. But I was always taught that if you want employees to learn something, you need to communicate it 7 times, 7 ways. So that's a newsletter, that's an email, that's a one-on-one conversation. And if I were consulting with them, I would ask them what the communication plan is. And then for each manager, if each manager had a certain contingent of that generation in their group and wanted to tweak the message, then yes, let the manager sort of maneuver the message in whatever way their group can hear it. But generally, for the overall message, I think we just need to communicate it more often. And then for tailoring it, that's a manager's job. You should take care of your team and help them understand what the organization is communicating. And so I believe the responsibility in that would lie in the manager.
Yeah, I agree with the repetition. Being in a marketing profession that I am, actually happened to me today where several email blasts went out to clients and anybody to take this survey. And is it an employee survey? And I'm like, the details have been in the email and it's been in the landing page and it's clear. And I'm like, how is this not clear? And clearly I didn't do it enough because it's somewhere embedded in there. And I think when it comes to wider communications that leaders need to portray, it is truly about repetition, also about clarity too.
Yes. And the first rule in change management, if you want people to behave differently, you've got to tell them why. So you can't just send a message and tell them what to do. You've got to explain why. They have to have the desire to do it too. So
I think there are a few times when we were talking, you've said some motivators, but I'm curious if there's like 3 to 4 key motivators for Gen Z that keeps them engaged at work, probably wants perhaps keep them to stay at the company. So a retention tool. What can leaders focus on as far as motivating them?
I think regular one-on-ones, establish that. I think establishing clear expectations about what you're asking them to do. It's not just handing them a job description. It's the walking down through every job expectation. And you might think you're over communicating if you're a manager, but you're not. So clearly defining job expectations, and then help them with the career path, help them know what can happen next, help them know what comes next. And then whether you like it or not, you're going to have to check on them quite a bit in the beginning. As a manager onboarding a new Gen Zer, I tell them to check in with them every 2 or 3 days. But it's that constant aligning, the constant helping them with clear expectations. And also understanding that, again, it's not that they're entitled, it's just that they're asking questions that we didn't think we were allowed to ask. So having some patience with some of those questions. No, maybe they can't have 6 weeks PTO this year, but maybe we can talk about that in the future. So just understanding what they want. And if you don't know, go ask them and then see if you can deliver in what they want. So as a manager, they just need a little bit more help aligning expectations in their role. That's what I would tell them.
If you look ahead to 2030, which seems so far away, but it's not, it's like 5 years from now, what skill or mindset should today's leaders start cultivating in themselves to stay relevant when it comes to bringing this generation, Gen Z, who is eventually going to be leaders in 5-10 years time? Because that talent pool is going to be dominant in the workforce during that amount of time. Because I remember when people were talking about my millennial group when I was in my early 20s, and then now we're leading companies now. So what do you say to today's leaders?
I'm going to go back to communication, but the first thing I'm going to tell leaders to do is have courage. Have courage to face this new generation and understand that this problem is not going away. I mean, it depends on, and I don't mean to call it a problem, but these conflicts in the workplace are not going away. I mean, if you look at some reports, Gen Z is going to make up over 30% of the workforce by 2027. So I would ask leaders to have courage. This generation wants to change the world. So how can we help them? I would ask leaders, again, think about how you communicate, have some patience, have some non-judgmental curiosity, and have these conversations. Have conversations with your leaders. How to prepare for this generation? I don't know. Let's go ask them. So have the conversations, have the courage to have the conversations, ask them what they need, lean into those digital skills, because there's so much talent and creativity in this generation. We need to tap into that. So leaders, gird your loins. They're coming. So let's ask them what they need, and then let's give them everything they want, because they're going to change the world, and I want them to do it.
Yeah, same here. Marcia, this has been such a fun, wide-ranging discussion. There's so much more we could probably cover with the Gen Z, but I just appreciate you coming on. You're doing some really good work. I know you wrote a book for the Gen Z in terms of like, how do you navigate this world?
Yes. It's called Play the Game. So it is a game, we admit.
Yeah.
And there are rules to it.
And I know you're talking with organizations now too about how to develop this group and nurture them and have them, encourage them to do good work. So I know you're doing all that work. Where's the best way to people connect with you or download any of your resources that you have?
Ellen Raymond and I wrote a book. It's called Play the Game, right here. You can find it on Amazon. Our company is called Adoy. If you can't remember that, it's Yoda backwards, because nobody gives better advice in the world than Yoda. So our company's called Adoy. But if you want some hardcore solutions to some conflicts we've talked about today, you can go to our landing page, which is genzworkplacefixes.com. All one word, genzworkplacefixes.com. Hit your email address in there and we will send you all the answers to a lot of different solutions that you can go and put into play right now. So that's how you can get a hold of us. We'd love to continue this conversation. One thing we've learned is everyone has an opinion about this, and it's been really fun to talk to all kinds of different people about Gen Z in the workplace.
My guest today has been Marcia Homer. Marcia, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.